Lenny's father, Hal Lone Pine, had done some recording for RCA when he and Betty Cody were working out of West Virginia. And when he came back to the Maine area, he wanted to have some albums made for him that he could sell at the gigs that he did. And so just connected with Al Hawks, who was running Event Studios.
I don't remember how Hal Lone Pine came to me, but I do remember that he wanted to talk to me. I think he called me on the phone, and I said, "Well, why don't you come down to the studio and we can talk?" And he came down, and Betty Cody was with him, and I don't think Lenny was there at the time that he came and talked to me. But he said, "I'd like to do some recording," and we had this plan called a self-help plan. And it means that the artist would put up some money. We'd give him the studio free of time and all of the tape and the hours of recording if it's necessary. And with the money they put down, and it was a very small amount of money. It seems like $200 or $300, something like that. It was more, seemed like a lot of money probably at that time. And we produced 400 or 500 records for them. And of course, they would go out and sell them and immediately get their return back. And so I explained that to Hal, that Hal Lone Pine, that we was going to do that. And he said, "Well, that's fine." He said, "I'll bring the boys in and we'll do a recording." Well, when he came in to do the recording, it was this his son, a young kid. I call him the kid because he was diminutive, he was small. And I think he was 14 years old. And I just thought he was going to strum on the guitar. I didn't look to him as being one of the lead musicians. When he started playing the guitar, it was like, wow, this kid has got it,
And Al Hawks was just knocked out by Lenny's ability. His ability to fit in, not only his solo ability, which was really incredible by that point, but his ability to fit in with whatever was taking place in the studio. And so he used them on lots of sessions, including straight ahead late 50s rock and roll sessions.
Lenny would be brought down sometimes before sessions by somebody who could drive. He didn't have a license in the early part of that sessions with him, and so somebody bring him down and leave him off in the afternoon or before the session, and it would be a couple of hours before anybody would show up because he had to get a ride when he could get the ride, and sometimes it might be 2 hours before the actual recording session. So he might come in at 1 o'clock, they leave him off, and the session didn't start till 3 in the afternoon or something of that nature. His guitar, one time, he didn't have the guitar with him. It was probably in his father's limousine or whatever they were using. And so he wanted to know if he could borrow my guitar, which was a Gibson. I think it's a 1934, 1935 L-double-aught Gibson guitar. Lenny Breau used this guitar at 15 years old in the Event Recording Studios in Westbrook, Maine. It was my guitar, and one time he was there early before the session, where the other musicians had not shown up yet. He wanted to play this guitar, and so I turned on a tape recorder, and while he was playing, brought a microphone over near it and picked up some of the tunes that he was playing. When I played back the first 2 or 3 he had recorded, he said, "Well, let's continue, let's do some more." So I turned it back on, just let it run while I was doing a few other things in the studio, trying to get ready for the session. And that Boy Wonder recording is this guitar. The guitar was made. I played back the first couple of things that he did, and he said, "Hey, wow, sound like Chet." And he'd talk and he stuttered. And I don't know if he knew that. And he'd say things like, "Al, do that again. Play that again." and I'd play this thing back to him, and he said, "No, that's good enough. I want to do something else." In other words, he heard it almost like he wanted to redo it, but he never did. Everything that he had on was just a one-take thing. So,
Lenny had pretty much absorbed everything that he could from Chet Atkins, who was, he's thought of as a country player, but he's a remarkably versatile player, and he, in fact, played on many of early rock and roll sides with Elvis and so on. And Lenny had absorbed all of that, pretty much. So he was playing the Chet Atkins style on the solo thing, Chet Atkins and Merle Travis. He was also noodling a lot in the studios. He loved to go down there and just listen to Al Hawks's enormous record collection. He was always absorbing music from whatever source he could. And he would play Al Hawks's little Gibson 00.
I can remember distinctly this record collection that I had been building up since I was 10 years old. I'm a record hound, I can't go by a lawn sale or a garage sale, if I think I see a box that might contain old recordings, One of the things Lenny Breau was very interested in is my old recordings. At the time in the library that was above the event recording studios. And Lenny liked to listen to some of these kind of recordings, and he had not heard about Django Reinhardt at the time, which was the three-fingered guitar player from France as part of the Quintet of the Hot Club of France, and Django Reinhardt. Of course, Stephanie Grappelli was a fiddle player. And so I'd play these old 78 records.
Tell us a little, where are we? What are we looking at? What's around?
This is my personal library, and it's around 40 to 50,000 recordings. They're in this room and another room adjacent, and I've collected them since I was 10 years old. And the other recording I can show you is he got very excited about this simple guitar player. Let's see if I can find. Whoops, I just lost my. Is that off or still on?
It's still on.
Let's see if I can. Arthur Guitar Boogie Smith. Let's see if we can find Smith here. Ah. I had a lot of recordings by this Arthur Guitar Boogie Smith. In the recording sessions that we did, Lenny was phenomenal in the sense that you could tell him what you wanted, and he could almost, at 14 or 15 years old, come up with it. Or he'd run things by you. He says, "Let me run this by you." And he'd play it, and it would come out really good. It might not have been what we really wanted at the, but he would give you 2 or 3 choices, and when we were using him to back up other musicians like Dick Curlis.
Well, this 9-pound hammer is a little too heavy.
Dick was admired Lenny terrifically. And Dick Curlis never felt comfortable in my studio unless Lenny was really there.
Okay.
I really felt that. We felt that we got more out of Dick with Lenny there. It was kind of a driving force for Dick. And Lenny was listening to a lot of jazz even then. And he gave his father a lot of problems on stage shows. Because Lenny liked, if Lenny was playing one of his father's songs that he'd repeat his father would at different shows, because as you moved on, you kept using the more popular tunes. Lenny got kind of bored with that, He wanted, when he took his break, he didn't want to play it note for note like he did every time, or the way somebody had done it on a recording as a lead guitar. So he'd kind of jazz it up a little bit. And I heard through the grapevine that his father used to get pretty upset with him and say, "Lenny, just play it country straight, Don't go off and too far into the futuristic guitar."
Tell me
styles.
a little bit about the dynamic between Lenny and his dad. How did they seem to get along in the studio?
I think Lenny Oh, in the studio, I don't know too much about after their period of time, of us, when they left. But in the studio, Lenny he admired his father. He really respected him a lot. I think I heard that there was some problems later on, and I think that was too bad. His father was very strong-willed, and Lenny I think, had the characteristics and personality more like his mother than his father. He was so much of a gentleman, even at 14 or 15 years old. He wasn't a wise kid or a brat or anything like that. I remember one time we was doing this Baby Baby recording by Curtis Johnson.
She's a real gone, baby, baby, baby. She's a real
I said, Lenny, I just wrote this song. I probably spent 20 minutes on it, and that is the truth. I went upstairs in that studio, and I said, I'm going to get it. Because Curtis Johnson was trying to do Elvis Presley. And I said, we don't need to do Elvis Presley. We need something that's different. And so I wrote this Baby Baby. And I said to Lenny, when you take your break, just make it kind of like Chuck Berry, rock, very that, just so it's a driving beat. Lenny, every time we get into it, he wanted to go all over the guitar, And I said, that sounds great, Lenny, for some other song, but this one. Finally, we get down, and we get the session done in the way I wanted it to be done for the lead guitar. Lenny said, I don't care for that. he just very politely, I don't care for that. In other words, it was so simple that he felt it was a waste of time doing it that way. The sessions that Lenny was on, in between when somebody had to go and we had to wait for somebody, everybody was there, but one guy was missing. We did all was live, no tracking, except on a couple of those things on Boy Wonder, where we wanted to see what he thought about this Les Paul effect. Once he got into that, he went wild. I wish that we recorded as many things as he was trying to do, and Lenny liked to experiment. He liked to try to get on the edge. And I liked that too because it was exciting to see what he was doing.
What tracks were double tracked? Because there are no credits on that CD, so I'm not sure. There are some songs where it sounds. Is there two guitar players there? It's kind of hard to tell if Lenny's doing something amazing, whether it was double tracked or whether he's playing with somebody.
Yeah, the Sleepy Willis was another electric guitar player
who was a very good guitarist. And they did some duos. He played with some bands. And Al Hawks was just canny enough to record this. It wasn't commercially released at the time, but he took really good care of the masters, and it was a real treasure for us. On some of the things they did with Sleepy Willis, there's definitely a little bit of a jazz influence. I would say he's not improvising the way he would a few years later, but he's phrasing in the way that a jazz guitarist would, and I think that he may have picked up some of that from Sleepy Willis, who was very influenced by Jimmy Bryant, who was a jazz country player. And they did some pop tunes together and some straight-ahead jazz tunes. They did a sort of gypsy jazz tune as well. I mean, they were just experimenting and having a really good time. But the essence of Lenny's style at the time was definitely the Chet Atkins style. And even when he was playing on rock and roll records, he was using that style.
There are times when it's hard to tell which one is playing on those. I have the session sheets. I made copies of them and sent them with the recordings to Lenny Bachman, not Randy Bachman, when I sold those masters to him. And Randy never used them. And I had, when that first came out, I had a number, probably 15 or 20 phone calls and letters, people asking me about, and I photocopied and sent them off to them. I think that was I call it a slight, really, on Lenny, that not putting that information on. I'm a historical person. I love to have the data, the dates, who's on the sessions and so forth. And we had actually session sheets that we made out. Some were pretty well scribbled sometimes, but the information was there, and it was for him if he and one time he said, "You didn't send the tapes, the master tapes." And I said, "Yes, I did." And he called and he said, "No, you didn't." And we had a little discussion about this on the phone. He was getting kind of heated up about it. I said, "I'm telling you, I sent them, Randy." About 2 or 3 hours later, he calls back and he says, "Oh, we found them on the shelf up over." I said, I couldn't believe it. The master tapes of Lenny Breau, you know.
Tell me how the Boy Wonder release came about. These have been recorded sitting on your shelf for many years.
And I don't remember the gentleman's name. I think he was an attorney, and he was working with Randy Bachman, because Randy Bachman decided, because Lenny influenced Randy greatly, and Randy wanted to capture everything that was out there in the world by Lenny. And this gentleman that was representing Randy Bachman called me on the phone, and I think it was like almost a year in between the time when he called and when I finally decided to sell these masters. And then Randy finally called me and he said, "I'm not getting off the phone till I own those masters." And I said, "Well, the figure still stays the same." He said, "No, we've got to discuss this." And I said, "You discuss it. I'm eating my supper," I said, "and I'll talk to you in between mouthfuls." And Randy finally, we made an agreement, and he obtained the masters.
Can you tell me just a little bit about the recording studio in those days? How was it recorded? What were you recording to?
We're using Ampex machines. They're professional machines at 15 inches per second, a lot of it. We had 7.5 and 15 inches per second. And it was full track. It was not stereo. And there were I think there were 350s or 351s was the model number of Ampex. We're using Altec or Altec, they pronounce it both ways. Recording console, Pultec equalizers. Using, I'm trying to think of what the microphone, Altec microphones, I think they were ribbon, 670 microphones, I think they were. Lenny was a very innovative, precision guitarist that could actually play with a lot of emotion. You almost felt that his mind, his soul was in his fingers on the guitar. I listened to every once in a while to the things that I did when he was only 14 or 15 years old. I said, wow, I wished I had taken the time to record him as a long playing. We weren't in a long playing records. We'd just been a 45. But I wished I'd had that time. And I feel sorry in reading about him in the books that I've read, that those people that befriended him took advantage of him with the drugs. And he was such a fragile person. He wasn't a weakling in a sense. He was just fragile in that music was everything to him. The body carried him around, but it was the mind and the guitar. That was the only thing that he was really interested in. And then somebody'd come along and say, "I can help you," or "You ought to try this or try that." That was a mistake. It was, and I hope that they rest in hell. People that did that. The last time I saw him, he was, how do I say this and be polite and kind to Lenny? Because he deserves it. I was asked to introduce and help the induction of Dick Curlis in the Maine Country Music Hall of Fame. And Lenny came in with I think it was a man and a woman holding him basically up. And somebody came down and said, "Lenny Breau is here." And I said, "You got to be kidding." He said, Lenny's here. And I said, I want to see him. So I got up from where I was positioned because I had to run some equipment. I went up and I said, Lenny, it's Al Hawks. He said, hey, man. And he grabs me, and he says, oh, I'm glad to see you, man. Wow. And I said, Lenny, stay here. Can you say a couple of words for Dick during the presentation? Yeah, man, I'll be glad to. And that's the way his mannerism was. I can just see it right now in my mind. So when the time came up, I sent somebody, I said, go up and get Lenny now. And they came back and they said, he's gone. I said, he's gone? He said he went out into the parking lot, and we just went out there, and he's nowhere around. He was gone. He didn't even stay for the presentation. He came for that, but he didn't stay.
Because his dad was nominated that same year as Dick Curlis. They were both inducted the same year.
I believe so.
Yeah.
I was involved with Dick on that one.
Oh, and he didn't stay for his dad's.
I didn't see him. No, that was sad. He was definitely involved with drugs, of course, as everybody knows, so I can say that. And he was in bad shape, really bad shape. It was sad.